Now, go to any Waitangi Tribunal hearing and it's quite common to see lawyers galore, speaking on behalf of their claimants. But has it reached the point where the law is overwhelming the Tribunal's work? Perhaps two people well qualified to answer that are Sir Edward Durie, a long-serving former Tribunal chairman, and Dr Ranginui Walker, who is a current Tribunal member. And they're with me now. Tēnā kōrua. Thank you for joining me.
Tēnā.
Has it lost its way, the Tribunal?
Well, Shane, it's got three major problems. You've mentioned one of them. It's become overrun by lawyers.
And let's briefly talk about that.
Right.
There's just too many lawyers in this situation, isn't there?
Well, for my own tribal district, we find that there's about 50 lawyers. And the effect of this is that the tribal leaders who have been appointed or expected to run claims don't get a word in. And matters that are really matters of tribal policy become decided by lawyers. Now, there is a place for the lawyers, but that place is towards the end of the process when one is addressing the strictly legal issues.
Ranginui, your thoughts? Too many lawyers. Do you agree with that?
I do sometimes wonder why 25 are sitting there perhaps throughout the whole week of a hearing, and yet only one or two may speak. That is an issue too.
Because it does seem that the lawyers are voicing the concerns, are presenting all these cases on behalf of the tribal leaders, and the leaders are being almost locked out quite early in the process.
Well, my understanding of it is that they are not, in fact, voicing the concerns of the tribal leaders. They are voicing the concerns of those particular individuals who have instructed them. So what we are facing is a question of how should the tribunal be focusing itself on these individual claims or upon the tribal structures through which the people normally work. And on that, from my point of view, we do have a very clear principle, which is in the Declaration of Indigenous Rights, that agencies from outside the tribes should be dealing with tribes through institutions of their own choosing. Now, if we can come to that, we're going to resolve these problems very quickly. If we go back to these first principles of working through the tribal institutions, we will resolve these problems of too many lawyers and of these other problems of too much legalism and of...
What do you mean by that, too much legalism?
What I mean by that is when you have to have huge numbers of documents that create quite a carbon print problem, and you're cutting down forests just to deal with some of the very simple issues in the form of legal documents.
So too much paperwork.
Far too much paperwork.
So too many lawyers, too much paperwork. What else needs to be improved, do you think?
Well, I think we also have to look at whether the tribunal is pandering too much to the Crown. One can understand how that can so easily happen when there's a concern from government to have these claims settled. But the tribunal must constantly remind itself of its primary purpose, and that is to make sure that it is hearing what the people have to say.
Ranginui, your response, do you think it is pandering too much to the Crown?
We're talking about a dynamic situation here. Initially, you take the Ngaitahu claim, you're dealing with one claimant. But under the modern system, where you're dealing with a large natural grouping, you've got hapu, you've got individual claimants coming along, and that's where the number of lawyers escalate. They're all represented at the hearing, and it's very difficult to see how the tribunal cannot have them there. However,
that's on the issue of the lawyers.
Yeah.
But in terms of the issue of the tribunal seemingly pandering to the Crown?
Not necessarily. The Northland hearing is an interesting one, where the gopher for the tribunal went up there to organise matters on the ground, and the people up there told our man, you don't tell us, we will tell you. And so that person reported back to the chief judge, who said, OK, if they want to organise the thing, we'll give the mana to them to do so. And that's unique.
I want to further explore, though, this issue, if you like, of the tribunal seemingly pandering to the Crown. Can you give me an example of what you mean?
Yes, I mean that there is a concern with the Crown to settle these claims promptly. And what I've noticed in a number of cases is the Tribunal going out and chopping off those people who are objecting to the treaty settlement process because they are standing in the way of a quick settlement of the claims.
Is that what's happening? Is the Tribunal chopping people off who object to the process?
No, I'm not aware of that. That's news to me. You know, the Tribunal and the kaupapa of the Tribunal as set by the previous head of it, Judge Williams, is that this is about justice and reconciliation. And I think that is the greatest boon the Tribunal has brought to this country, that little people get the chance to put their story on the table. It's entered into the historic record, and there is a settlement and there is a sense of closure. And the reports of the Tribunal are going to be a wonderful future point of reference for students for the rewriting of our history.
There is a view, though, out there that, especially since the Crown seems to be more interested in direct negotiations, that the Tribunal isn't that relevant today, apart from what you've just spoken about providing that forum to deliver and present a tribe's history. But how relevant do you think the Tribunal is today?
Oh, I think it's still relevant, but as I said, it is a dynamic situation. It's ever-changing. It was easier in Eddie's day when he had a single claimant to deal with. Now we've got multiple claimants, and I think it was a mistake that individuals could bring claims under the legislation, because the socio-political units of Māori society and culture are hapu and iwi.
But Shane, let me just get this clear. I am not suggesting that the Tribunal does not have a role in the future. My concern is how that role can be strengthened for the future, because I believe it does have a very significant role to play. Once the treaty settlements are through, there are a number of pressing contemporary issues, and Māori people have nowhere else to go to but the Tribunal in order to progress them.
So there is a need for the Tribunal.
There's an absolute need for it.
The issues, though, that you raise or that you speak about, have they just come about, or were they there indeed when you were there? Because some people may be watching this morning and thinking, well, it's a bit rich. You were the chairman of the Tribunal and now you're raising all these issues. But so what I want to know, have these issues only just emerged? Or?
No, they were there, they have been there for a long time. And what we must constantly be doing is reviewing the way we are achieving certain objectives for the people. Are we achieving those things properly? And that's the spirit in which I raise them. Also, as an end user now, for my own tribal group, when we try to move forward, we find we're just blocked by legalism, we are blocked by lawyers, and we need to talk with the Tribunal about how we can undo those blocks. And I think if we could just have that conversation between the Tribunal and the leaders of those tribal areas, we can undo those blocks.
Good, because it would seem as though the whole big picture, the whole process, though, is so underfunded, under-resourced. No. I hear of so many claimants, though. I hear of so many claimants. I know 2 or 3 off the top of my head who are still waiting at the door, who want to settle. They want to sit down at the table with the Crown, but they've been told, no, stay at the door. We don't have the resources to be able to deal with you right now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right on the negotiation side, but I don't believe it is a question of funding as far as the Tribunal is concerned, so much of strategising appropriately with the funds that it has got. And that strategising is a case simply of having that longer conversation that is needed between the Tribunal and the people. It's not happening.
Do you think it's all working? Do you think it's broke, if you like? Does it need fixing, the Tribunal?
I think it needs more resourcing because on one hearing that I sat on, it's been 4 years since we stopped the hearing and our report hasn't been produced yet. We're trying to get it produced. But
and is that because of lack of resources?
Lack of resources, yes.
Thank you both very much for joining me this morning.